I think speech is probably one of the most important or useful skills that we've ever developed in the entire human race, in fact, right? Like, I would think imitation is pretty up there, but speech allows us to communicate more than what imitation would, right? And so, therefore, of course, we come into a language, right, which structures the speech itself. And also, I think speech is more important than writing because it it has the immediacy effect that writing does not, right? And what writing does is essentially it's just a long form of speech, right? It extends throughout time. And so that's how, all of our ancestors of like humans and shit, we are able to extend the speech of those before us and therefore keep compounding upon ideas throughout time. And this is very important for human survival and its, entire civilization, right? And this is also why the spoken word and tales and myths are passed down throughout tradition, throughout human history, because it's just so important to pass on those lessons. And so, therefore, speech is at the forefront in terms of one of the most important skills, right? That's why there's always the elder that is able to, tell you about stories of the past and shit like that, right? And then we come to the internet age, which is now this historical record basically of we can now track the entire human race just through this portal, and it interconnects us all, right? Which is what speech was supposed to do. It was supposed to give us like this intermingling and kind of, it was basically the internet before the internet was a fucking thing, right? And especially when you do the telephone too, of being able to talk to people across certain distances, now we can do that instantaneously through the internet. So I think speech, basically, the fundamental basis of it is it allows you to communicate and collaborate with others. And it also helps you to display your value as just a person contributing to your society or your clan or your clique, whatever, or your job. And without speech, if you aren't able to speak eloquently enough to display your value, you have to display your value only through actions. And some people may not be able to see those actions, right? There's only so much that someone can pay attention to. And so therefore, speech is sort of a condensed version of actions. So although you can gain more information through observing someone's actions, the shorthand of it is to observe someone's speech and how they speak. Right. So this is a very plain shortcut and something that you fundamentally have to use in certain circumstances. So therefore, when it comes to esports itself, we can look at positions like the head coach. How well are they well spoken? How do they convey their ideas to, the GM, so to speak, right? When they're trying to get hired and when they're doing this interview, right? Because virtually all companies within the entire world do a person interview where you have to talk and you have to explain your own values and your own skills as a person. And so therefore, speech is one of the most important things when it comes to employment or just to contribute to your entire society, because if you aren't able to speak, you aren't able to maximize your potential in terms of your job or your employment. So therefore, speaking is a very good skill in order to obtain and to maximize and to master. Same thing with a player. A player that is more eloquently spoken is a higher chance for them to attain the job or whatnot, or to stay relevant within the job market. And this is maybe why we see some players able to stick within the scene for so long, is because maybe they are so good at speaking and displaying their own value as a player themselves. So as you can see, speech is very fucking good, and it should not be understated as to how important speech is when it comes to your longevity within your entire community and your status even, or your job welfare, right? And I think speech might actually be more important than writing, even to today's current age, because speech, I think you're able to reach a broader audience than what was once before written, because written, you could pass through multiple different hands, right? Like books back in the day with the first printing press and stuff. although let's not get into the whole corrupt aspect. But it's the idea that with writing, the great advantage of that was that you could pass it to multiple different people and it spread throughout the entire world, right? And so therefore you don't have to be in person to speak to someone, right? So that is the main primary, I guess, advantage of speech, right? As I was saying before, speech was more important than writing. That's the main advantage of writing. Now, speech nowadays, you can transfer over to the entire globe through the internet. And that's how speech has basically suddenly changed, to where now it's more, I think, at the forefront than it has ever been. And I think that it's more important than writing to this day and age. But not only that, it's because there's a massive amount of illiteracy in the entire world. So for some statistics, 54% of the US above the age of 16 and then going all the way up to 74 years old have a 6th grade reading level. It's fucking abysmal. That's over half of the US population, in terms of like appropriate age and whatnot. Obviously, someone that's fucking 10 years old probably isn't going to have a 6th grade reading level. And some people are slow learners, right? So they may pick up speed later on in their life. And the PIAAC, the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competency, says that 50% of adults in the U.S. have a level 1 literacy. So a level 1 literacy basically means that it's like, job applications, and all you have to do is just read the job application, and where it says name, you fill in your name, where it says address, you fill in your address, right? Very simple. There's no contradictory things that you need to put. There's no real big interpretations or things in which you need to link back from previous sentence or something like that, right? So it's just very simple and plain. So if only 50% of the US has, this ability to just do that and that's it, and nothing past that, that's very concerning, right? And so this goes into the idea that writing itself is more of a complex idea, and through speech you can actually bypass that illiteracy of what is for many people. And Jordan Peterson actually is one of big proponents of this, about talking about how podcasts basically get past the deficiency of what writing is, because writing, you can only read someone's writing or book or article or whatnot by dedicated time into doing that, right? You can't really do it passively while you're doing something else, like working. Maybe you're a truck driver, or maybe you're working at an office, or maybe you're working out at the gym. You can't read someone's article while you're doing all that shit. So speech in videos and podcasts bypass that. And so therefore, with this type of speech, or rather speech rather than writing, you're able to capture that audience that you otherwise could not. So I think that entirely is another thing as to where speech kind of gets the leg up over writing, because now people are so busy with their job, with maybe even 2 jobs in order to have rent or cover rent, and then you got your kids and shit, and cooking and working out, and so there's a whole lot of shit, right? Now, as far as the idea of speech, and I think one of the ways in which speech mastery is on supreme display is usually, I would say it's a lot of the times you can go to music. And one of my favorite forms of music is hip hop, and it's the art of freestyling. And I think freestyling is one of the crazy modes of speech which isn't very easily replicated throughout anything else, really. It's coming up with clever ways in order to formulate sentences that often do rhyme, and then you can create different rhyme cadences in order to create different effects. And I had studied freestyling back in the day. When I was like going into college, I would drive to college, and so it'd be like a 30-minute drive. I would put on an instrumental and I would just start rapping, just freestyling, anything that comes to my mind. And I would notice my tendencies of saying the same things over and over again, maybe breaking it up, tripping over my words, and then you just restart again. And eventually you're able to go for the entire time. And throughout some of the sentences that you develop, you end up coming up with some clever shit that you would never think of before, right? So it's very fun, and I highly recommend people that are very into speech to try and freestyle a little bit, because I think it teaches you to formulate the same message but in a multitude of different ways, right? Because we all know that hip hop is mostly about cars, or you rhyming better than someone, or just bigging yourself up, or even you can go a little bit philosophical too if you want, but it's about essentially formulating a similar message throughout your entire freestyle, just in different ways, and through using different nouns, different verbs, different adverbs or adjectives, whatever. And I think broadcasters specifically can benefit a lot from freestyling, because like I said, it allows you to say things in a different way and also come up with some clever lines that you normally wouldn't be able to come up if you didn't really understand the art of freestyling. And there's kind of a sort of a magic when it comes to the idea of freestyling, because a lot of the times people can tell whether you're actually freestyling or you're not. Which is becoming less and less these days with rappers, but whatever. And I think I know that I've heard of some casters actually using rapping to warm up their own tongue mechanics, right? Because if you're able to at least go through a difficult song, like say, a lot of people say they rap the Eminem Rap God song, right? Where he's going like super fast. And so it kind of warms up their tongue so that they're able to go through the cast without pausing or without tripping up on their own words. And that's fantastic. By the way, that's not freestyling. That's just singing a song, right? But it is a really good way in order to warm up your mechanics, right? It's kind of like if a pro player were to go into a custom game and try and CS and get 100 CS in 10 minutes, right? Like it's basically the same shit. So it's a good little practice, and I think that benefits a lot of casters. But I think freestyling can benefit casters even more with their speech. Journalists, you can broaden your net through speech itself, because yeah, sure, you're comfortable doing writing and everything, and maybe doing a story or doing an interview, or even doing an opinion piece through writing. That's fantastic. And I know a lot of people within, the League of Legends scene, as far as fans, or maybe even other analysts or coaches or players, they'll read your article and they'll say, wow, that's really good, whatnot. But it's also inaccessible to a lot of other people as well. So you're speaking to a limited, finite audience, basically. And with speech, you can access an even greater audience, because the people that know how to actually read higher level pieces are able to also understand speech, right? Because written language and speech kind of go hand in hand in some sense, right? But it's harder to work in the reverse order of understanding speech into the written language. It's a little bit more difficult. Now, you could think of journalists like Emily Rand or Fionn or Kelsey. They all went into the idea of having more on-camera appearance, and also doing more things related to podcasts or videos and just speech in general. And now Emily is on the broadcast, and like, good for her, man. That's really sick, because it allows her to cast a broader net of the ideas that she's trying to convey. And I think that is a benefit in and of itself. And of course, the primary example of this entire idea would be Thorne, of course, right? Where he was basically just a writer in the very beginning, and then realized that speech was his biggest weakness. And so he decided to cover that, and he did it through baby steps, right? Of doing interviews through speech. And he wasn't ever on camera on it too. So he didn't have to do a performative kind of act or to use his own body language in order to emphasize certain things. So then he moved on to his Thorne Thoughts videos and tried to develop his own speech through that. And now he's a master. He's an orator. So this whole idea of speech can help even that entire sector. And I think this whole entire idea of speech being important, I think this is why you see the most suave people climb up in a company, right? People that are very friendly, or people that are able to explain themselves very well. The reason why they're able to climb in that company is because of their speech. It's because they are well spoken and they can communicate their own thoughts very clearly, and also that will then convince the people above them to start to move them up and push them up the ladder. That's a great skill to have, and that will get you very, very far, not only just with the skills that you have to do those jobs proficiently, but it helps you push yourself above all those other motherfuckers that don't know how to speak properly or speak well. And with that said, I've never understood why people get mad at those that are more popular than them or more successful than them, because essentially those people have developed the art of persuasion. So if you are lacking in that, well, then start working on that. Start working on your speech. Start putting yourself out there more, because this whole speech angle is a way for you to have an avenue to produce more work, right? To produce yourself and show value and show skill at whatever profession that you decide to go into or you are pursuing. So all in all, build up your speech, and eventually I think you'll just become unstoppable, because once you build up your speech, you're able to clarify your thoughts and you're also able to display your value properly.